Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the recognition and the opportunity to address this August chamber in respect of the financial package delivered last Monday by the Honorable Minister of Finance, the member for Diego Martin North East. A few rebuttal points, Madam Speaker, in respect of the speaker before me. Had I not been in this parliament today, Madam Speaker, and I was just hearing a voice, for at least the first 45 minutes, I would have thought that the person speaking was an opposition member of the Tobago House of Assembly. And whilst the member spent some time speaking about what is happening in UNCA and UNCB, I thought the member was auditioning or at least screening for the seat of Tobago West. But, Madam Speaker, I have news for the member. The member spoke about UNCE, UNCB, who clapped in, who bonging this. I want the member to look at who was appointed to serve in the Senate of this, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, in the person of Ansel Dennis, who's coming to be the next candidate for Tobago West. So, Madam Speaker, when you look at what was presented, the member had know everything that is happening in the UNC, but the member didn't know about how to turn off her cell phone and went roaming throughout the Caribbean. The cell phone on roaming. The member failed to indicate, Madam Speaker, the member didn't tell you all those ministers who have keys to Victoria Keys via AGC, the minister failed to tell us that. But the minister knows everything that happens under the sun. So, Madam Speaker, as I move on, firstly, I would like to applaud the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Member for Superior, for her contribution. And I thank her for being a voice of reason, a voice of leadership, a voice of truth and hope for all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has set the tone and stage for all of us to demonstrate the absolute destruction brought on by yet another PNM government. They like to boast and take credit for everything and that they have nothing to do with. The PNM has spent almost a decade destroying this country, destroying the economy, Madam Speaker, destroying the social systems, and destroying our democracy. What else can you expect from a party that has crashed our economy twice since independence? Perhaps some form of delusion. The PNM actually think third time's a charm. What else can you expect, Madam Speaker, from a party that is led by a jet-set Prime Minister, a callous Minister of Finance, and a lackluster Energy Minister, and the infamous 1% friends and financiers? What can we expect, Madam Speaker? It makes the choice of the UNC so much more easier at the next general elections. The UNC and the Member for Superior, we are a party and we are a leader with a proven track record of leadership and delivery. We keep our promises on this side, Madam Speaker, and after a decade of destruction, promise, hope, and strength are what we need most right now. Madam Speaker, last Monday was the 10th time that the Honourable Minister of Finance came to this Honourable House and presented and bluffed his way through the government's fiscal policy, the budget, throwing out figures for growth and straining to pat his own self on the back, Madam Speaker, for what was deliberately constructive delusion. The Minister of Finance began his contribution highlighting the fact that this is his 10th budget in the course of 9 years. And let me assure him that this will be his last. The the dethroned acting Prime Minister, the dethroned party chairman, and the soon-to-be dethroned Member of Parliament for the Martin Northeast. Yet, quite cowardly, his calculation of growth, Madam Speaker, and I know this honourable member has had some difficulty with growth for a long time, for expansion, Madam Speaker, focus only on post-2020 period. That is what his presentation was, Madam Speaker. He only considered, the honourable member, that is, Madam Speaker, considered and rolled out figures which give figures from post-2020 period. Nothing back to 2015 when they assumed office. But that is what we are here to this afternoon to remind the population of what the PNM met when they assumed office in 2015 and what they have brought it to today. On that, Madam Speaker, let me make it clear, the only ones that are fooled by this PNM budget is the PNM. Because the fact is that Trinidad and Tobago has declined drastically when measured against what they assumed and what they got in 2015, when they met, what they met in 2015, Madam Speaker. It is when we look at the performance of the PNM from 2015 and find the level of failure, the level of incompetence that they use to disguise the reality by using the post-COVID-19 pandemic as the benchmark. That is what the Honourable Minister of Finance did. In fact, the PNM has everything to feel ashamed of. But the Minister of Finance has found a convenient opportunity to use the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent global shutdown as a baseline for the PNM's past performance. Madam Speaker, let's say someone asks the Minister of Finance, Honourable Minister of Finance, to borrow his car, and he gave them it with a full tank of gas, and they return it with quarter tank full. He will go and put half tank of gas, put it up to half tank of gas, and say, when I got my car back, it was almost empty. The car nearly shut down on quarter tank of gas, but I turned it around. Because of my intervention, the tank is now 100% fuller than when I got it back. That is the metric that this Minister of Finance will use. That is kind of maths that this Minister of Finance will use. This is what the PNM is well known for, conveniently switching between numbers and percentage whenever they find an opportunity to distort and to hide their failure. Again, it is no surprise to anyone when the PNM took office that the country was in a much better place. Again, it is no surprise to anyone when we look at the dire state of our nation, because that is the very best that the PNM can do. Madam Speaker, almost every economy in the world, post-COVID, when restrictions were opened, and when restrictions were lifted, experienced a surge in economic activity because everything had went to almost zero in terms of it halted almost to zero. But in more serious countries, Madam Speaker, with a serious government in place, there is no sly attempt to change benchmarks for the sake of political one-manship. The leader of opposition dealt with those facts extensively, and I fully endorse her assessment. This budget, Madam Speaker, was a farce. It was devised purely to disguise how weak our economy has become. It has nothing to do with sustainability, and a mediocre performance at attempting to rally the troops, as the Minister of Finance did last Monday, did nothing but expose the fact that the PNM has no performance to account for. Madam Speaker, I wonder if you're aware that in the 10 budgets since 2015, the Minister of Finance has spoken for almost 34 hours in this House. And to be clear, last Monday wasn't about delivering a budget. It was a filibuster performance, Madam Speaker. Do you know what it's like to speak for almost a day and a half and say nothing? Do you know what it is to speak about a day and a half on the budget alone and not only say nothing truthful, but leave everyone more confused than when you started?
Madam Speaker, standing order 48.6, see nothing truthful.
That's okay. Please continue.
Madam Speaker, the effect of crime on this country is showing up in many forms and fashion. This Minister of Finance reminds me of a newspaper article, at least, where some company is claiming to be the #1 and the #2 business. That is what this budget and this Minister of Finance give in terms of, what is, an analogy, so to speak, Madam Speaker. So there it is, 500 billion spent, Madam Speaker, $500 billion. 10 years later, 34 long wrenching hours, and the PNM has absolutely nothing, no positive effect whatsoever, no positive effect on the people, on crime and violence, on our roads, on education, on health, on sports and community, on diversification. No positive effect whatsoever, Madam Speaker. We have wasted an entire decade in allowing a small group of people to ruin what could be a real victory for all of us. Even the Prime Minister has turned to appealing to the population to look for achievements of his government, not failures. What achievements, Madam Speaker? What achievement does the Honourable Prime Minister speak of? The Prime Minister have even warned about hardship until 2027. It makes you wonder which leader of the PNF is in charge this month, because the Honourable Minister of Finance is saying something else. And whilst the Prime Minister wants us to tighten our belt till 2027, we have had in this House in the last session, Madam Speaker, a Salaries Reviews Commission report, which I think the honourable members on that side wish to bring to the House in this session. So if the Prime Minister is saying to tighten your belt,
just ask all members that, if we could contain the level of our noise, I would really like to hear the contribution of the Honourable Member for Caroni Central. Member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I was making the point. The Prime Minister is telling the nation to tighten our belts. And in the last session, this government
Madam
laid...
Speaker, with reluctance on a point of order, because this may continue for the next couple of days. 55(1)B, we've heard this so many times. I really don't want to hear it another set of times.
So, Member for Diego Martin Northeast, thank you for inviting me to consider 55(1)B. I think it's a bit early in the day for that. Member for Caroni Central.
Yes, Madam Speaker. So,
Caroni Central is ruffling Diego Martin.
Let us see whether the government and whether I preclude them in bringing the recommendations of the Salaries Reviews Commission to this House in this session. Because the Prime Minister might not be aware that even his most ardent supporters who have benefited handsomely from his tenure are unable to identify any real actual achievements, ignoring needs in infrastructure in 9 years and suddenly looking busy. That is not performance, Madam Speaker. That is distortion. And this is what the PNM produces. It keeps failing and keeps failing. And that is why when you look at the bridge in Chaguanas, and this is something that, the Perseverance Chaguanas, the bridge that collapsed, there was a reopening about a month ago in time for school. It caused tremendous traffic in the entire central region, from Couva to Chaguanas. Madam Speaker, when you type in Waze, sometimes 2 hours, a 15-minute drive was taking 2 hours. You know that bridge collapsed up to last week, Wednesday? They put up, Madam Speaker, I think they put up a bar so that they could restrict certain heavy vehicles from passing. And then that bar broke down, Madam Speaker. It went back all the way to square one. Numerous hours spent unproductive time in traffic. That is after they had a ribbon cutting exercise in the week leading up to the Friday before school opened. That is distortion. We have to question now we have to question the quality of projects that are being delivered on other projects that are being rushed because the general election is close, Madam Speaker. So, ignoring the crime and violence that has damaged thousands of families and ended the lives of almost 5,000 people since they assumed office, Madam Speaker, after over $60 billion that was spent in Ministry of National Security, it is not performance, it is failure. And that is why the honorable member who came before me spoke for almost 45 minutes about Tobago and not concentrating on the issue or not concentrating on the ministry in which that member is tasked with. I would have thought, Madam Speaker, or a reasonable person would have thought, Madam Speaker, when you are prosecuting your case for re-election, that you will say what you have done. The honorable member for Tobago West spoke for 45 minutes as an opposition member of the THA, in my respectful view, Madam Speaker. And that is failure. That is failure. Ignoring the increased levels of poverty, hardship, homelessness, unemployment, and underperformance in our nation's schools. It is not performance. It is failure again, Madam Speaker. And with 10 years of PNM holding power and still blaming governments before them that existed 10 years before, that is failure PNM style. For context, Madam Speaker, and please indulge me so that I make clear the basis of the issues I am raising. When the previous government, led by Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, Honorable Member for Siparia, came into office in 2010, they found a staggering level of domestic debt, outstanding wage negotiations, unpaid VAT refunds, over budget, and incomplete projects in the tune of millions. This was despite, Madam Speaker, unprecedented energy earnings during the period of 2001 to 2010 when the PNM debated office. They came to office and found a 13.4 billion budget and left behind a 44 billion budget when they left. Or as the Prime Minister of Finance, or the Minister of Finance likes to say, an almost 250% increase. But having taken office in 2010, the member for Siparia immediately went to work. The highest level of foreign direct investment in our economic history was achieved in 2 years. We brought home the most Olympic medals in our history in just 2 years, Madam Speaker. We have experienced the lowest level of crime in 33 years, just 3 years after our honorable member of Siparia assumed office. All secondary schools from Form 1 to Form 5 had access to a laptop computer. And there was now access to 100 new schools, with 100 almost more completed after just 5 years. Foreign direct investment were the highest, Madam Speaker, and the Heritage and Stabilization Fund had grown to a staggering $5.6 billion by 2015. In 5 years, it grew by almost $2 billion. A strong roads network, highways, and drainage network was achieved between the period 2010 to 2015. An expanding healthcare system, expanding small business sector, low unemployment, food prices that were comfortably within the reach of all income groups. A social welfare system that is working with people to get out of poverty, not exist in it, Madam Speaker. 5 years, and at the end of it, we left a debt to GDP ratio of 42.5%. It is now a staggering 75%, Madam Speaker, or thereabouts. That is what we have grown to, the debt to GDP ratio under this current administration for the last 10 years, in which there has been a decade of destruction. Today, with 10 years and 500 billion spent, what do we have to show for it? Madam Speaker, here's an interesting...
Madam Speaker, point of order. 55(1)(b). The member is actually tediously repeating himself. 55(1)(b).
Again, I thank you for inviting me to consider. I'm not as yet there. Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you.
Deeply disturbed by your contribution.
Madam Speaker, that is That is what happens when you speak the truth.
Yes.
They cannot accept the truth, so they rise up on irrelevant standing orders. That is what happens, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I will now turn my attention in this context to one of the core areas of my responsibility in terms of which I shadow. It's the area of sports, youth, and community development. And yet, it has been a long and difficult decade for this sector, or depending on the side of a house you sit, Madam Speaker, it might be rewarding for some. Madam Speaker, this year's allocation for sports and community development is estimated at $390 million, which when combined with our development program comes to a total estimate of $431 million. The Minister of Finance boasted that the PNM government has promoted sports and given strong support to national teams and athletes. You also talked about making sufficient or significant investment in maintaining existing infrastructure. They confused freehand spending with investment in sport, Madam Speaker. That is what it is, freehand spending with investment in sport. Because the Prime Minister, the PNM investment, has left the Maniranjan Stadium still closed, located in the constituency of Pointe-a-Pierre, despite it being listed in the public sector investment program since 2021 for upgrade, along with the Hazel Crawford, Larigome Stadium and Atto Boldam Stadium. Madam Speaker, they will not tell you that right now that the Dwight York Stadium and the Hazel Crawford Stadium has lost its certification as a professional facility.
Shame.
So now there are no professional facilities and up to standard stadiums in Trinidad and Tobago. And this affects our track and field fraternity because no senior athlete can make a national team from here. We lost our accreditation, Madam Speaker, in December 2023. So that is what this PNM is about, investment in sport, when they say they make significant investment in sport. Now in PSFE 2025, this is what we find in developmental program of a master plan for sports and youth facilities. So what? The PNM has a plan for a plan. So they develop a master plan to include policies and procedures for the upkeep and maintenance of physical structures of facilities, the engineering components, the sport-specific component, and all aspects relating to the facility usage. So, Madam Speaker, how are we to trust the integrity of these PNM-generated documents? These are the same people who produced the Vision 2030, aka a re-edited version of the Vision 2020, which had cataract. By the way, as was for dollar, what the PNM called GATE, and called it their own. As was the Revenue Stabilization Fund, which the PNM called Heritage and Stabilization Fund, and they called it their own. This is how easy misappropriation is for this government. With a track record like this, and the threat of property tax, what should we expect next? They say, Madam Speaker, your house is not your home anymore. It has been designated a structure for habitation, and it now belongs to the PNM. We know that we cannot take the PNM word for anything, but now one must wonder whether we can even take as fact the information contained in what should be government documents. But that's not all, Madam Speaker. The PSIP of 2021, 22, 23, and 24, we saw the upgrades of community swimming pools in Diego Martin, La Joqueta, and Cuba. Yes. We saw upgrade and rehabilitation of the Sevilla Club. We saw the upgrade of recreation grounds at Tudge Road, Caparo, Park Street, Morval, Grand River in San Grande, and Marac. We saw the upgrade of the Mahaika Oval. That is what we saw in this PSIP 2021, 22, 23, 24. Upgrade of the Dwight York Stadium, refurbishment of the now infamous Skinner Park Stadium, which cannot house or cannot host the secondary school's football game anymore. They now have to drive down to Mahaika Oval for the hosting of this game. Shame. Madam Speaker, I grew up playing championship football or football for Naparima College. And most of our games we were played at the Skinner Park. Now, you cannot host the secondary schools football match there. Yeah. When you look at what the ground has become, it is much smaller than the regulation size, Madam Speaker. Every year since, these same programs were repeated. In PSIP of 2025, what do we find? Well, if you look a few years down the road, Madam Speaker, the PNM has finally completed one of these projects here, Madam Speaker. It's called the Tudge Road Recreation Ground. At this rate, Madam Speaker, it will take another 15 to 20 years for all of these projects to be completed and for them to repeat promises after promises. Remember, Madam Speaker, PNM promises never materialize. And not just that, Madam Speaker, they keep budgeting, spending, and achieving nothing. And their plan is to bring it under PSIP every year. In PSIP for 2025, I see that the Dabadil Malabar swimming pool was completed and handed over since December 2023. What about the others? What about the Kuva swimming pool? It took the PNM 4 years to upgrade a recreation ground, but how long does it take for them, for a pool to start working? And they have the goal to talk about performance in this House, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance also boasted with numbers about the successful hosting of international sporting tournaments. But here is what he had to say about the Mani Ramjan Stadium. I want to find out about the Mani Ramjan Stadium that still remains closed to date. The Atobolian Stadium that cannot be accessed by the public. Is it not accessible, Madam Speaker? I remember in the years 2013, 2014, on my way from work, we'll stop off at the Atobolian Stadium, and we'll stop off at the Atobolian Stadium, Madam Speaker, and there'll be hundreds of persons who are exercising on an afternoon. They have shut out all these public, the entire public from the use of the Atobolian Stadium for no particular reason, Madam Speaker. The T20 World Cup hosted in June this year, Madam Speaker, created a traffic and a parking nightmare that a little planning could have prevented with actual planning. We debated in this House, the bill for the ICC bill, and I warned them, Madam Speaker, about proper planning for traffic situation. I asked them what is the plan they had for traffic management. The Minister of Tourism came in this House, responded, and indicated that all the plans were in place to ensure that traffic gridlock will be a thing of the past. They cannot implement, they don't have the willpower, Madam Speaker, to lead this country. And that, Madam Speaker, didn't just stop there. You would have thought a responsible government would have learned at least from the ICC T20 World Cup. It didn't stop there. In the CPL game, Madam Speaker, even a team which had police escort, one team arrived late to start the game on the Friday evening because of poor traffic management and access, Madam Speaker. And we want to call ourselves competitive sporting destination and talk about sports, tourism, and so forth. And we can't even manage traffic, parking, and the ease of access. Madam Speaker, it doesn't stop there now. This one made BBC News and ESPN Sports News. The ICC deems Turuba pitch unsatisfactory, much like the performance of this government, Madam Speaker. Unsatisfactory. The ICC deems Turuba pitch unsatisfactory. The International Cricket Council has deemed the pitch prepared for the 2024 T20 World Cup semi-finals at Turuba unsatisfactory. The bongs during the match against South Africa was unpredictable, with deliveries squatting or rearing up from similar lengths. And this was said by Afghanistan coach, Madam Speaker, Jonathan Trott, after the game. Pitches at Brian Lara Academy were difficult throughout the tournament. This government which started, or previous PNM administration, which started the construction of the Turuba Stadium at $250 million, went to $1.2 billion, and yet there are so much issues still at the Brian Lara Stadium. Madam Speaker, there was an article by AZP News, Prior Bihari, on the 2nd of October 2024. UDCOT promises to fix issues with media box at Brian Lara Cricket Academy. The Urban Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago, and I read from the article dated 2nd of October 2024, is promising to fix issues with media facilities at the Brian Lara Cricket Academy. This follows last June during the World Cup with the game between West Indies and New Zealand, where the park and ride system caused major chaos, as I indicated before, massive traffic jams at the CPL games. But what's interesting, Madam Speaker, and I hope I don't get my words mixed up here, it says the viewing glass in the media wing fogged up during a game between West Indies and South Africa in August.
They are using TV.
F-O-G-G-E-D, fogged up, Madam Speaker, during a game between West Indies and South Africa in August. The media room. So, AZP News contacted one Ms. Stapleton Wims from UDCOT, and she's indicated they will be looking into other issues in the media wings identified, such as blockage of the 30% of the field while journalists are sitting there to report. You have a blockage of almost 30%, Madam Speaker. That is the status, Madam Speaker, of the Brian Lara Cricket Academy. So as I continue, the minister went on about hosting of the 2025 Carifta Games, which he estimated will attract 840 athletes from around the world. He even called this country a sports leader, making hollow and misled claims about tourism and job creation. But the Honorable Minister, he was silent on the fact that our last participation at the Olympics game saw a return of 0 medals, and the Olympics before that of 0 medals. We can't even win a single medal, Madam Speaker, and that is certainly not down to the athletes, but rather lack of support from the government. Madam Speaker, by contrast and for context, I wish to remind honorable members that in fiscal 2015, under the member for Siparia, development program in sports received an allocation of 122.3 million. And that is some of the work that was undertaken by the UNC government. Madam Speaker, there had been a lot of other programs which were highlighted by the honorable member, Minister of Finance, when he spoke in the budget, Madam Speaker, and he indicated that they had established and would complete a number of upgrade works. They had, deal with something called the National Schools, Secondary School Track and Field Championship. And this was discussed, Madam Speaker, in the budget. The Honorable Minister of Finance said the program serves as a platform for identifying and nurturing young athletic talent. This has benefited 600 students and athletes from across the nation. This is what the Honorable Minister said. I have some questions for the Honorable Minister, Madam Speaker, which must be answered. How exactly has this program, this is the National Secondary Schools Track and Field Championship, how exactly have this program benefited these 600 athletes? At what level were they performing prior to this program being implemented? And what benchmark were they working towards? What monitors and measurements are in place to ensure continued progress of the 600 athletes that you have identified? Given the government's poor handling of Olympic preparations, how exactly will identified talent be directed and supported to ensure a balance in education as well as athletic development? Those questions are some burning questions based on the announcement and pronouncements of the Minister of Finance. The Honourable Minister also spoke about the I Choose Sport program. Madam Speaker, they have these action-oriented names for everything. But with everything else with the PNM touches, nothing works. Because everything is done for favors and publicity, not sustainability.
Well said.
Notwithstanding that, it was stated that this program has successfully engaged almost 2,000 students across 52 schools to date. Madam Speaker, what does this mean? I am engaging the House right now. Does this mean that members of the government bench will understand and take heed of everything, or be guided to do better in their portfolios? No. I could say to the honourable members that last Monday, the Minister of Finance engaged 40 members in this budget. That statement does not speak of the fact that all those members, except himself, believe his entire budget to be a publicity stunt and a bold demonstration of distortion. So, with that explanation, I'd like the government to answer these questions in respect of the I Choose Sport program. What were the terms of engagement of these 2,000 students? Which are, or where are these 52 schools located? How were these schools selected? I am not aware of any of these schools, 52, chosen in the constituency of Caroni Central. What were the skills level of the students at the start as compared to the end of the engagement? And what are the next steps for the high-performance students who show their talent and want to make a choice in pursuing athletics? Those are some questions that we require from the Minister of Sports and or the Minister of Finance when he wraps up this debate. So, Madam Speaker, all of this tells us that sport is still being treated by this government as a publicity stunt, as a channel for their closest financiers. It has nothing to do with a vision for producing top athletes, providing superior facilities to attract sport tourism, or creating sustainable opportunities for young men and women of this country. So, Madam Speaker, that is some of the issues in respect of the portfolio of sports and community development. I want to move quickly, Madam Speaker, to youth development. This is the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service. In any environment where every day there are new innovations and the evolution of current innovations, the Minister of Finance seemed proud of the fact that he had numbers to quote. Madam Speaker, the young people of this country are not numbers to be quoted. They are not stats to use conveniently. If the honourable member wants to use stats, I have some stats for him. And I will share those shortly. Madam Speaker, the youngest people in this country are the men and women who will one day be doing the jobs we do today, but in an environment that is completely different. You want a David print for me? Madam Speaker, our every effort must be to ensure that they are prepared to adapt to continuously changing and evolving sectors, technologies, standards, and best practice. Our young generation are being compromised, Madam Speaker. Our unemployment rate among the youth stands at a staggering 19.2%. This is disproportionate. This is disproportionate and higher than a 5.4% national average. This means 1 in every 5 young people, they are looking and cannot find a job. And while the government boasts about developing youth with new plans every year, let me tell you what they actually do by way of example. Last year in this parliament, they approved a sum of $1 million to spend on youth employment policy. Do you know what was spent on that, Madam Speaker, on that youth employment policy? 0.
What? Shame.
In fiscal 2024, $5 million was approved for the implementation of a national youth policy. Actual spend from $5 million, $800,000, or 16% of what was approved.
The minister is preoccupied. Leadership.
Dr. Ramkissoon, a leading economist, highlighted this in an article, Youth unemployment, is significant social challenge, that failing to engage youths in meaningful work is a major barrier to economic growth and contribute to a dysfunctional society, allowing young leaders to exploit the situation.
Shame.
That is what we are seeing now, Madam Speaker, because of the high unemployment rate, which now stands at 19.2%. 1 in every 5 young people is now unemployed. Last year and this year, in the budget, the Honorable Minister of Finance boasted about the support they were providing via the Elite Athlete Assistance Program to our young aspiring athletes who were seeking to represent our nation. Yet for fiscal 2024, the year just gone, a year that included the Olympics, the minister slashed the allocation to this program by almost 36%, chopping $2 million off the initial allocation to the program. The upgrading of corporation grounds was slashed by almost 80% last year, with the allocation for development and upgrading of recreational grounds, parks, and spaces hacked by a massive 98%. Madam Speaker, as we are speaking about the upgrading of corporation grounds, in this financial year, the Minister of Finance has allocated a measly $75,000 to the Cuba Tabaqui Talparo Regional Corporation for the maintenance of grounds. 75,000. Madam Speaker, there are 103 grounds which fall under the remit of the Cuba Tabaqui Talparo Regional Corporation. 103, $75,000 allocated for the maintenance of those grounds. This government is clearly not serious about promotion of sports and youth development in this nation.
No, this is 140 grounds.
I stand corrected by my member for Cuba South. It's 114 grounds, 75,000 allocated, Madam Speaker. This is how the government basically is sabotaging the development of sports and youth in this country. When you look at under the programs and initiative funded by the PSIP, the development and upgrading of recreation grounds, parks, and spaces, estimated $10 million in 2024, actual spent $167,000, Madam Speaker. Development, I repeat, Madam Speaker, development and upgrading of recreation grounds, parks, and spaces, estimated $10 million last financial year, actual spent $167,000. This year.
Shame.
Honourable Member for Caroni Central, you have 2 more minutes of original speaking time. You have an additional 10 minutes extended time if you wish to avail yourself of that to complete your presentation.
Speaker, I avail myself. Thank you very much.
Please
Very well.
The upgrading of corporation grounds, again, $10 million last financial year, actual spent $2 million. Estimate for 2025, $5 million. So, Madam Speaker, this is how the government, they have sabotaged development of the sporting community. The professional state of the art stadium constructed by the member of Superior's government to promote swimming and cycling as a sport development has been allowed to deteriorate in favor of repairing venues. So, Madam Speaker, nothing this government has done shows any evidence that their policies are based on assessment of future needs, real innovation, and preparing young people for an accelerated future. Madam Speaker, the Jewelry Operation Program, they are boasting about the Jewelry Operation Program, which was started under the UNC. It was shut down by the government, and last year they trained 80 persons. So when they shut down the decimated the energy sector, shut down petrol and so forth, they're now rushing to do and to graduate 80 persons in the jewelry operations. It was the Kamala Prasad Bisesa administration that instituted the jewelry program to the NESC, Madam Speaker. That is the vision that the UNC has for this country, Madam Speaker. So this government has, has basically failed the youth of this nation. We have the numbers of people who graduated but no signal of number of people who are really assisting some of these training programs and so forth. So, Madam Speaker, I want to just move to one additional thing before I move to some constituency issues, and it deals with, Madam Speaker, the SHADE program.
SHADE?
Yes, Madam Speaker, the SHADE, and I think that is a fitting name under the Ministry of SHADE, the SHADE program under the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service. Madam Speaker, I have a very serious concern that I call on the government and an honourable member for La Jocata del Paro to answer, and during which I hope he comes during the course of this debate with evidence support, the information. I would like to ask the government if it's true that it was the government of Guyana that donated the shade houses to the SHADE program, whether those shade houses were received, and also whether they have been distributed and where. Madam Speaker, I am advised that the SHADE program started with 100 students. 60 participants graduated. Only 35 joined the relevant cooperative, which has not been registered to date. A total of 20 shade houses were promised for cohort 1, but only 4 were delivered. No deadline on when the next 16 will be delivered. It is my understanding, I'd like the government to corroborate this and provide clarity on this, because I am further advised there has been quite a number of changes on coordinators post cohort 1. It was brought up during a meeting that the shade houses were delivered from Guyana and just sitting, they need assembling.
The shady business.
The shady business, Madam Speaker, in the SHADE program. Our sources indicate, Madam Speaker, and confirm that the 4 shade houses that were built in Chaguaramas were not built using the material provided by Guyana. If this is true, it would mean that notwithstanding the donation from the government of Guyana, an understanding was made to construct these houses locally, but not with the material from Guyana. Because whoever built these shade houses at a cost of some $5 million, when the actual cost is about $400,000 for one, they did not do a proper job. Did not do a proper job, Madam Speaker. They disregarded ventilation. So, Madam Speaker, the irony is the course itself taught the proper construction of the SHADE program, the shade houses, and the proper construction by the method by which you should do it. But whoever got the contract to do it, built it, and they got it wrong. That is what is happening in the SHADE program.
Shady.
It's a shady business down there, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, those are some of the questions I asked of the Minister of Youth Development and National Service. Madam Speaker, I have with my couple minutes remaining. There are a couple issues, constituency issues, which I like to highlight. And one which I always do, Madam Speaker, is a Presal Government Primary School. Madam Speaker, the Presal Government Primary School has been housed in a community center for the last 10 years. In a community center. Persons have graduated from the school, just like Ramai Chase, member for Opuch, West. They have graduated with a certificate saying Presal Government Primary School and have attended a community center all their lives. We have had some very prominent sporting persons and members of parliament, Madam Speaker, who have attended the Presal Government Primary School. Persons like Lady Kelvin Ramnath, former member of parliament for Couva South, former member of parliament for Caroni Central, Dr. Hamza Rafiq, attended the Presal Government Primary School. We had quite a number of cricketers, members of the cricketing fraternity, prominent members, Ranji Nanan, Madam Speaker, Dinesh Ramdin, Inchan Ali, Ravi Rampal, they all attended the school. And they are now housed, Madam Speaker, in a community center. It is more than shameful, Madam Speaker, especially when there was an allocation to complete the school, which was almost, I would say, almost 70% completed in 2015 when a member of Superior demitted office. 70% completed. There was an allocation sometime in 2017, 2018 for the completion of the school. Where has the money gone, Madam Speaker? It was reallocated, and these students are still housed in the community center. Madam Speaker, it then brings me to the other school, which is also housed in the community center right now, which is the Palmas Government Primary School. When I asked the Honorable Minister, this school was gutted by fire, parts of it, on Thursday, the 7th December 2023. On the urgent question, I asked the Honorable Minister what urgent steps will be taken to relocate the school. The Minister of Education told this Honorable House that they are working with the Kuva Tabaki Talpara Regional Corporation to have the affected areas and portions demolished and rubble removed to allow for possible occupation of the usable portion of the school. That plan was shelved and they moved to the Edinburgh 500 Community Center. So I have 2 schools in Caroni Central which are now housed in community centers. So when they boast about building community centers, it's because they're building community centers to house schools and students, Madam Speaker. Anyhow, Madam Speaker, there was an undertaken, or at least a response by the Honorable Minister to say that they are working with the Kuva Tabaki Talpara Regional Corporation for demolition and so forth. And I asked her, the Honorable Member, that is, when the demolition will take place. The Honorable Member's response was that discussion are having now, and we are working out the arrangement for when they will come to do it. This was in December, at the parliamentary sitting, December 13th of December 2023. Madam Speaker, the cooperation, together with the corporate citizens and persons in that area, mobilized and went onto the school compound on at least 10 occasions. When they went there, Madam Speaker, there was always some reason why the demolition cannot take place. I am being told reliably, Madam Speaker, that the ministry has indicated to the Kuva Tabaki Talpara Regional Corporation that they will get a contractor to do the demolition, Madam Speaker, and they do not require their services anymore. So why is the Kuva Tabaki Regional Corporation was willing to do it together with the good men and women from the area, the small businesses and so forth, to demolish and to assist assist with the reopening of the school as fast as possible? The ministry's response was that they will get a contractor to do it. So that is what is happening at the Palmas Government Primary School. Madam Speaker, despite the best promises of the member for Lupino Bonnet, water is an issue in the constituency of Caroni Central. We have known my own water supply, Madam Speaker, 24/7 water supply has moved to 1 in 12 days. And we hear this afternoon the Honorable Minister boasting about projects and millions of dollars being spent on wells, all within the constituency of Caroni Central. In fact, he indicated, the Honorable Member, that a new well is being drilled in Rickson Trace of Arena Road, Freeport. Madam Speaker, they are taking the raw material out of Caroni Central and pumping it elsewhere. The own constituencies, in my own constituency of Caroni Central, Madam Speaker, we receive water 1 in every 12 days. Madam Speaker, there are a number of bridges that remain almost impassable, and they have been gazetted, Madam Speaker, in terms of their tonnage weight. The amount of tons which can pass over those bridges have been compromised. Madam Speaker, we speak about the Batchasing Road bridge. We speak about the bridge in Faisal Trace, and very soon the bridge in Arena Road. Madam Speaker, the road infrastructure in the constituency of Caroni Central is about the worst. In particular, the Edinburgh Road, the Freeport Mission Road, Cedars Road, Lackwissa Road, and environments, Madam Speaker. They remain almost impassable and have led to destruction, much alike the destruction that we have to endure over the last decade by this government. So, Madam Speaker, those are some of the burning issues within the constituency of Caroni Central, and I wish to thank the honourable constituents for the trust and confidence they have reposed in me in being their Member of Parliament. I thank you, Madam Speaker.